How's it going, Justin Our Minds family? So today's podcast, we have two legends, two pioneers of the MMA sport in America and the UFC. We have Pat Miletich, the creator of the Miletich Fighting System. He was a UFC champion and a pioneer of the sport overall. And Jeremy Horn, one of his students and also a pioneer with over 170 fights and should have been a champion a couple times over. Great podcast. We talk about all things MMA, the transition of MMA and both of their careers and some of the fun stories between Jeremy and Pat over the years of training. You got to listen to this one. Welcome back to the podcast. I'm here with two UFC legends. Man, I can't wait to get into this podcast today. So we're here with Jeremy Horn, and then we're here with Pat Miletich. We've had Jeremy on now. This is the third time.
I think so.
I think you've been you and this guy named Serba have been on the most on my podcast. I love it. And then the legend here, Pat Miletich. You started wrestling when you were 5 or 6, right? In Iowa.
Yeah, kindergarten, first grade, right after I got beat up by the middle school wrestling coach's son, I figured I better start.
Yeah, that's what started the path there. And then, so starting there, when it comes to like wrestling, because you're one of the pioneers for putting systems together, like different fighting styles when it comes to MMA, from my understanding. When you as you advanced as a wrestler, what triggered you or wanted you to start learning different styles of martial arts?
After I left college early, my mother was sick, so I left college early to try and help her out. She had heart problems, and I was working 3 jobs. And one of my jobs, pouring concrete, a lot of people, Jeremy knows this story. One of my bosses on the concrete job basically was bragging about being a black belt in karate, and that a karate guy, and he was from Kentucky, in his southern drawl was saying, boy, karate boy can whoop a wrestler any day. And I go, well, obviously you haven't run into a guy that wrestled in the state of Iowa. And he goes, well, lunchtime we can go out here in the field and we can find out. So this is long before the UFC, of course. Went out in the field at lunch, and I just took him down and kind of slapped him around a little bit. Didn't really want to get fired, obviously, but he gave me a free pass to go to a kickboxing karate gym. And so I went there, and I had boxed some as a teenager at the Davenport Boxing Club, Albino Pena's boxing club. But nonetheless, it wasn't until Friday of that week I saw the black belts sparring, and they were going hard, like they were really going hard. And I thought, okay, this is what I want to do. So I wanted to be skilled at striking, and so that kind of started the journey. But when MMA or NHB started and the UFC came about, what I observed is that I wasn't a world-class wrestler. I wasn't a world-class boxer. I wasn't a world-class karate or kickboxer. But I recognized that if all these arts were starting to be combined, if somebody were to put them all together based on, I guess, I had to question my abilities and question my own ego at that point and say, well, I'm not good enough at any of these one things to say I'm a wrestler and I'm going to use that to beat you, that I observed everybody else was doing. I thought there's a way to find a hole in everybody's game. So to take, I guess, the best components of every art that I had learned at that point and more would be the best path to be a complete, I guess, fighter.
Oh, that's amazing. Did you get any inspiration from some of, like the Chuck Norris's, RIP, the Bruce Lee's, the people, because that was kind of like his philosophy too, right? Combine the pieces of different martial arts that could kind of structure Jeet Kune Do or the philosophies he had as a martial artist.
Well, yeah, Bruce was a contrarian thinker, right? He recognized that pulling pieces that were effective from different martial arts was super important. He was also cast away and cast out in many ways because of, being a contrarian thinker, which, we've learned through the years on numerous fronts that being a contrarian thinker, can get you kind of blackballed in certain ways. But nonetheless, it leads to a lot of world titles and guys ending up on pay-per-view television in the fighting world. So it's effective, right?
No, 100%. And then I'd like to get into, I've talked to Jeremy a bit about it, but man, what were some of the what were some of the biggest hurdles early on for like the MMA, like the scene of the beginning of MMA for you guys?
I think Jeremy will add on to this, but it was, everybody in the traditional martial arts world, which, was a money-making machine, of course, at the time, was very, very adamantly against what we were doing, that what we were doing was not martial arts, and wrestling, it wasn't martial arts, and grappling and jujitsu and things like that were not martial arts. What you guys do is not martial arts, that sort of thinking. And those guys Jeremy was there, of course, in the early days when a karate guy or two would show up, a taekwondo world champion, quote unquote world champion, would show up and say, I want to fight the toughest guy in the gym type thing. And eventually, when they knew they couldn't beat us, they had to join us. And then at the bottom of every taekwondo school or karate school or kung fu school sign, it would say Jim's Karate and MMA, or Chung's Taekwondo and MMA, that sort of thing. So,
did you have anything to add?
Yeah, no,
Okay.
That's exactly right. Like everybody started realizing the effectiveness of NHB MMA, just combining all of it. So everybody had to jump on the bandwagon, and now it's like, oh, we've discovered these lost scrolls that show that there actually was grappling in our style all along.
Yep.
So yeah, that was pretty typical of like, oh, if you look back far enough in Taekwondo, they do grapple,
Well, because there's Japanese jujitsu and like the
Mhm.
lineage, like once you get past the sword, you have to have hand-to-hand contact, right? And then for you too, to scroll back a second, you went so you went from karate, did you? And then it was it boxing, kickboxing? That's where you the start was for you, right? Before MMA.
wrestling and boxing, then kickboxing, karate, then kind of, Muay Thai, jujitsu, and of course Sambo, and some other stuff that got intertwined as it went. And technically, I think Jeremy will agree with this. Technically, what we were doing was catch as catch can. I mean, we were catch wrestlers. We were combining the best of all submission stuff from BJJ and Sambo leg locks and all of that with wrestling. And so technically we were catch as catch can guys.
Yeah, which I mean, catch wrestling is freaking high level
Yeah,
grappling.
it's always like I feel like wrestling in its most generic meaning is kind of the fundamental martial art of everything. Like one person grabbing another person and physically controlling them, that's wrestling. Whether you call it jujitsu, judo, Greco-Roman wrestling, freestyle, whatever. It's all one person using their body to control another person. That to me is all wrestling or all jujitsu. It's all grappling. Whatever label you put on it doesn't matter to me. It's all the same.
Yeah, and that's one of the original lineages for martial arts for America, right? Wasn't it catch wrestling in like the early 1900s?
Yeah, back in the day when the pro wrestlers were actually somewhat competitive athletes they weren't scripted matches. They were actually kind of submission wrestling matches to a certain extent.
And that come up between Japan and the States, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's the like Minnesota and Iowa State fairs would have crowds of 50 to 80,000 people watching Farmer Burns and Gotch and guys like that go against the Terrible Turks. And those were real matches. They would last a couple hours sometimes, where those guys would battle. Best 2 out of 3, pin or submission, right? So you couldn't lay on your back and play guard game. You were going to get pinned and lose. So it speeds up the action, number one. It creates better animals, number two. And the tendon strength, the explosiveness, all those things that go with wrestling, the power, everything else, along with the technical attributes of finesse, grappling, and submissions.
Oh my gosh. And back then too, you had this like early 1900 farmer strength. I can only imagine how strong some of those guys were.
Some of those guys were
And
really
the beautiful thing is the Shoot Pro organization, which I'm part of, and I'd love to get Jeremy involved in this in a big way. we're doing a CatchCon event in Las Vegas, May 1st through the 3rd. The tournament will be on the 3rd, which will have cash prizes for people who are competing exactly the same way that Burns and Gotch and the Terrible Turks and all of them competed. Same rule set, same everything. So Jeremy's experience and knowledge in that world would play a big part in, the educational part of this. And certainly there's a big part for Jeremy to be in that. So it would be very cool. Yeah, it's a big deal because there's seminars going on the 1st through the 2nd, and then the 3rd in Las Vegas is the actual competition.
If you want any help promoting too, we Just in Our Minds podcast would love to throw some stuff up there for you.
I'd love that. And I can connect you guys to the CEO, Jake Shannon, who he's the CEO of Shoot Pro and scientific wrestling and all of that. So it's exciting because it's a totally different level of grappling, and the rule set makes it so everybody really can compete and go at it. Jiu-jitsu guys, wrestlers, sambo guys, judo players, everybody can get involved.
What are the kind of rule sets for that? Like, do you know the ins and outs?
Well, you have rounds, of course, and you can set the rounds at any time you want, for viewing purposes. So it doesn't go on forever. There's also points, but it comes down to best 2 out of 3 falls or submissions. So that's the rule set. And, I've reffed, of course, some of these matches, and it's absolutely, the crowds love it. The crowds love it. And Jeremy knows when we used to do even tag team submission grappling matches back in the day, there's tag teams involved in this as well. And the crowds, I'm telling you, the crowds absolutely love it.
Oh my gosh, that sounds like
we used to do the tag team submission wrestling back at Stars and Stripes, his local bar that hosted a lot of the fights back in Iowa. It was awesome. Yeah. I actually had found one of our videos where it's you and me against Tim Sylvia and Nate Schroeder.
Yes.
You remember that one? That was hilarious. It was awesome.
The man with femurs for forearms.
Yeah. Yes.
I was listening to that podcast when you said that he had to get those plates put in, but they had to special order ones for his forearm for Tim Sylvia.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was like plates for cattle bones or something.
Yeah. Which makes sense because that's a bull of a man.
Yeah. Yeah.
He's a big guy. So going back into the, for one, now I want to hear more about these wrestling matches. So we'll start there. So how'd you guys get into, how'd you guys get into tag team wrestling matches?
Well, so Monty Cox was doing local shows at the time, and he would do like your typical weekend bar fight where he'd schedule a handful of amateur fighters, and he'd let some of the locals, just come in and try it out. And kind of as like the main attraction, we would do like basically tag team wrestling matches. So it would be, like I said, it was me and Pat was one of them against Tim and Nate. And basically 2 people start and you're grappling to submission. But if you get close enough to your corner, you can tag your partner and they'll switch. So if I get taken down and I'm on the bottom and I'm losing, I reach out and tag my partner. He jumps in and jumps on the guy that's, my opponent. Then I just step out of the ring. So yeah, it was, it's just a fun wrestling match.
It's good to be on Tim's side, I guess. He's 6'9" or whatever.
Exactly. He can reach all the way across the ring to tag. So yeah, but yeah, it was fun.
Did you guys win?
Yeah, we did. We did, yeah. We kind of cheated a little bit. We just dragged him over to our corner and just tagged repeatedly until we're both in the ring mauling him. But yeah, it was fun.
I love that. That's fun.
Yeah, it was a good time. And like Pat said, the crowd loved it. It's just everybody's having a good time, and it was a lot of fun.
And that's fun too, because then I feel like those kind of like they spark more of that, for I don't know if there was casuals back then watching, but there wasn't so much human cockfighting,
right?
You gave somebody a little bit of a, like you said, it's the fun side of things too. So bring some good eyes on it. Going back to your career, did you do pro boxing, amateur boxing, into kickboxing, and then MMA? Was that the trajectory for the career for you?
I did I think 1 or 2 pro boxing matches, but it wasn't it was kind of intertwined with the MMA stuff, more just to stay sharp. The time that I spent at the boxing gym training was to get my hands and my head movement and my footwork up to par where I felt it, it needed to be to be fluent, right? And just I saw that combining footwork and head movement of Western style boxing, of course, with the hands, along with the Muay Thai tools, the knees, the elbows, and kicks, that was probably the most effective way to strike. And so that's kind of what it was. But the boxing experience, because at that time that was the best amateur boxing team pretty much in the nation, Peña's Boxing Club, numerous great boxers down there, including Michael Nunn, who ended up being the best pound for pound boxer in the world for about 4 years. There was a lot of beatings. I bled a lot down there. So, but the nice thing about that is once you got to where you could hang in that gym, there was really not anybody out there that you really feared in terms of striking. Like in MMA, people didn't move their heads the way these guys did. They didn't have footwork, in the same way. They didn't understand feints and fakes, at that level. So it was a different world, which certainly prepared us all for MMA and the UFC and stuff. So.
And then when did you start developing your Miletich fighting system?
Like what?
After I got beat up at the age of 5 by the middle school coaches wrestling.
From day one. And then,
well, all goes, I don't think that I was ever realizing that I was developing anything until everything started working. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Taking the best of each, creating that.
Well, it's just a wrestling mentality is what works, what endurance and strength and reaction time and techniques and all these things that work in the real world, because traditional martial arts was based on theory and a lot of bullshit. And so, when you're thrown into real fights, what works, what's proven to work. And that's the only thing you're going to really use. And well, you have to practice it on each other, which, Jeremy and I did for many, many years. And I walk with a limp because of it, but, but nonetheless, that's really what it comes down to. Right.
And then, around what time was when you actually started your own gym? Well, time frame, maybe.
I don't know. What year was it that you came and started training with us, Jeremy?
I moved to Iowa in December of 1998.
Okay.
So
okay.
You already had an established gym there. You were training at the old racquetball court. And I think you had for a couple of years before that. So
yeah, I think it was 96 or so, I think is when I started.
Okay. And because that was right around the time that UFC was even created, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think the first UFC was in 96.
Mm-hmm.
93.
93. Okay.
93. Okay. And then what were some of the early stages for your gym? You said that you were building this system. What were some of the beginning, maybe the philosophy behind it for you as a coach or for you as an athlete?
Well, I think being accepting of great wrestlers showing up, great boxers, great kickboxers, people with different skill sets, to be able to blend all these people together and figure out how to fill in the blanks that were missing in each one of those guys. You know what I mean? So Jeremy was already obviously a very good fighter when he showed up. So, it was more about all of us pulling really good attributes and techniques and training techniques and endurance techniques and all these different things from each other. It was, it was an experiment.
And like you were saying before the podcast and on other podcasts, you had a respiratory issue. So for you, you had to break yourself or fix or heal yourself of that respiratory issue. And then that really started developing a specific methodology behind your training. Correct?
Yeah. And being able to go, from struggling on 3-mile runs my whole life, for wrestling and things like that, to being able to run extremely fast for long distances and not struggling with my breathing was basically because I always had to work about 3 times as hard as everybody else to try and keep up with the people who weren't sick. That work ethic carried over when I could breathe correctly and that my respiratory system healed. So that just lent itself to my work ethic and just deciding that I was just going to outwork everybody, because I recognized I wasn't a better athlete than these top guys, but I knew that I could outwork them.
Well, and that's a big thing too, right? Naturally gifted individuals in the
Yep.
gym usually aren't the hardest workers a lot of the
Yep.
time. So then you have the catch wrestling, that wrestling mentality. The grit's going to get you a lot further
Mhm.
because you see your holes and you develop the way you're supposed to.
Yeah, yeah. And growing up in Bettendorf, Iowa, um, middle school, high school wrestling, it was always a powerhouse, even in the state of Iowa. So the guys that were second, third, fourth string on the wrestling team, and the other guys that were starters, one weight above or below you, were generally going to be your toughest matches most of the time. So in the room, you just got used to very high quality competition and constantly being pushed to your limits every day. And so then when you go out to wrestle against another school, it was a lot of times in the locker room we were bringing money and throwing dollars in the pool on who would get the fastest pin, the most 3-point near falls, things like that before a match. We were betting money who was going to, dominate the most, not were we going to win or not. You know what I mean? So that was the mentality.
100%. And like you were saying, I think, like you mentioned here and before, and most people know, if anybody knows anything about wrestling, Iowa has always been a very high level for wrestling. And then your high school was one of the highest, correct?
Yeah.
The state.
No, we were ranked top 10 in the nation, most of my high school, life and things like that. And there were, I can't remember what year it was. It was when I had the UFC belt at the time, and I was being interviewed on TV, and the interviewer said, "What's it like being one of the toughest men in the world?" And I said, "I'm like the 35th toughest guy in my community of 35,000 people."
Yeah.
I get beat up by most of the people in this town, so.
Right. What's that quote? If you're the best in your gym, then you got to go to a different gym.
Kind of different gym.
Find a new gym. Absolutely. Yeah.
So Jeremy, what brought you to Pat's gym?
Well, so I had my first fight. I was living in Omaha and I was training with my friends, and we started in a more traditional style. So I didn't really understand all that was needed to be successful at this. I just knew that it was fun, and I was training. I thought, I would train like an hour a day, a couple times a week, and I was like, that's it. That's my martial arts training. And then at my second fight, I actually fought for Monty. I fought in a tournament that he put on, and then Pat was the main event there. And I just got to know him, and Mark Hansen, a training partner of his, was the guy that I fought in the finals of the tournament. And so getting to know them, I realized that they had the formula that I needed to actually progress in this sport. It's like, I want to learn how to play soccer. I'm just kicking a ball around. I'm like, oh, these guys actually have the tools to show me how to play the game. So I started going up there pretty regularly. I'd go up there like once a month, and Pat would let me stay with him for the weekend, and we would just train all weekend. And he really showed me like what it actually means to train. No, it's like, you need to get a set of tie pads, and you need to get a clock, and you need to do this, and you need to do rounds of this, and you need to do this, this, and this. And I was like, holy shit, this is totally different than me just wrestling with my buddies for an hour.
Yeah. You go in there.
Yeah. And I'm like, oh, so this is what it's like to actually train like a competitive athlete.
Right. Glass ceiling was broken.
Yeah, exactly. So I was like,
broke.
this is it. I got to go here. I got to go move. So I moved out there in like I said, in 98, and just hit the ground running as best I could.
And so, who all was out there when you got out there in 98?
Really nobody. There was a handful of guys that obviously Pat and I would remember, but nobody else would. But it was like, Ben Earwood, Nate Schroeder, Andy. I don't remember his last name. Little Asian guy, Andy
And again, Glenn or whatever, and then Bart Geyer, Mark Hansen.
Rick Gravison was there too early on. So yeah, a handful of guys, but all tough guys. Steve Rusk, stuff like that. A handful of tough guys that just, everybody's having fun training. Nobody really saw what this was going to be. It was just, we all love what we're doing. So we get together all the time and train hard. And obviously Pat had a great background and a great kind of game plan to say, okay, we need to do a certain amount of this, and we need to do a certain amount of this, and we need to spend some time doing this. And then we're going to go get in really good shape outside of that. So, it really was just, I think, everybody just having fun and training and exploring this this new thing called NHB. So
No, that's amazing.
Yeah,
When did NHB come around?
that's what it used to be called. No holds barred
Okay,
was what it
that's
was
right,
started
yeah.
to begin with. And then I don't know, one of the early handful of UFCs, Jeff Blatnick, they didn't like it. No holds barred was too scary, and it was a bad look for the sport.
Mhm.
We're trying to gain credibility and a little bit of respect. So Jeff Blatnick coined the term mixed martial arts, and so NHB became MMA. And then they added some rules and some regulations, started doing things a little bit more above the table.
I think the MMA thing was a strategic by the Fertitas because they were, a big influence on the Nevada athletic boxing, boxing commission, all of that. So when they got it passed as MMA, that the sport would officially be called MMA, then they could trademark Ultimate Fighting because everybody was using the term Ultimate Fighting for their shows and all that sort of stuff. So that was a first step in them, taking that trademark and controlling it. And then the rest of the sport, or the sport in general, was called MMA. So it was a strategic move on their part as well, historically through the process, I guess is the best way to put it.
Can you imagine if there would have been a moat with the Gators and all that stuff that they were talking about?
That would have been awesome. That would have been a lot.
Because it was the Fertitas and then Big John McCarthy, and some of them were the originals, right? Because he was one of the original referees, and they kind of stacked together their brick. They don't want all those rules. And so what was your first impression of Jeremy coming into your gym?
Well, I knew he was tough because he had fought my buddy Mark Hansen, who was, a big guy. He was 270 probably at that time. I'm trying to remember. And he was an All-American, all-decade lineman for the University of Northern Iowa. He's a guy that, bench pressed 500 pounds and squatted 500 and some odd pounds, maybe more probably. But so, yeah, it was a hell of a scrap, to say the least. And so Jeremy's like, I think I want to come and, kind of see what you guys are doing. I was like, beautiful. That's awesome. And so the thing with Jeremy is he was such a nice person, and he has such a good demeanor about him, that I used to have to try and prompt him in sparring to hit me back hard. I think he was just respectful. He was just being respectful. And so, for a while there, it was, listen, I would have conversations with him while we were sparring. Like, if you don't start to hit me back hard, I'm going to start hitting you harder, to try and get him to hit me back, right? And I was confused and perplexed by why this guy won't hit me back a lot. And then eventually he started zinging me, and I would be like, yes, that's exactly what that's what I need. I want you to freaking blast me back. And then ironically, it's funny, Jeremy was the first person in that gym to drop me with a liver shot. And then he ran around the room and high-fived Hughes and Jens Pulver, and while I was rolling around on the ground gasping for air. I still think about that and laugh my ass off.
Those are good old days. I mean, that's like the youngest son when he finally gets the takedown dad, right? That's a moment of glory right there. We all looked up to Pat so much, and he was the one that brought us all together, and he was the one that was guiding all of us and showing us how to do all this. And then, yes, I finally got one on him.
Did you skip the next round?
Oh yeah. Then he just beat me mercilessly for the next couple of weeks. But, but it was worth it.
And then you look up at the clock afterwards.
Yes,
we still got 4 minutes left.
Yeah, but it's beautiful because it's that process of all of us making each other better, right? And you can't get better unless you get your ass kicked. You're just not going to.
Yeah. And if you're the one that teach him the liver shot too, you're like, yeah, that's exactly what I wanted from you.
Yep.
Yeah. So it was an observation, I guess, is there was never a week where I dominated in my own gym, right? That's what it's supposed to be like. You're supposed to create a bunch of these monsters that you get to the point where you're like, I can't deal with these guys anymore. It's not physically advantageous for me to get in there with these guys anymore. because I'm getting wrecked.
So then Jeremy was in there. So what was the trickle of talent coming in after Jeremy? Was that when things started kind of picking up? You started having, because you had the who's who in a lot of ways. You had
we
Tim
had a lot of guys come
Sylvia,
through.
Lawler.
I think,
Matt.
so Robbie was a local guy, but he didn't train a whole lot. He was younger. He was 17, 18, something like that. And he would come in every once in a while to spar, but he didn't really train a whole lot other than that. But I know he was a local wrestler in Bettendorf, and I think Pat knew him from those circles. But I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Pat, but wasn't Matt Hughes one of the first guys to come, like, as an outsider to come in and start training? Like, you and I went to a fight in Chicago, I think, and watched him fight.
Yeah, and Jens ended up being, I think, the first UFC champ, and then I refereed Matt's first fight in Chicago. I was asked to referee up there, and he fought a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, a guy actually from Brazil, and picked the guy up and slammed him. I think knocked him out when he was in a triangle, like he did to Carlos Newton, and ended up knocking the guy out and splitting his head open and some other stuff. And when I observed Matt, I think he was really the only guy that we really actively recruited, I guess, because after witnessing what Matt was capable of and knowing his wrestling background, I thought, if you ever come to Iowa, I'm pretty confident we can make you a world champ. And so, yeah, he eventually showed up, called me up out of the blue, said, I'm going to come up, let's work out, this Saturday. And he drove all the way up from Hillsboro, which was like 3.5 hour drive for him. And what really sucked, it would have been bad healthy, but I had a respiratory thing going on at the time, like a bronchitis or whatever. And so like an hour into the workout, maybe 30 minutes into the workout, I said, I'm good. And he goes, no, I drove 3.5 hours to come up here to work out with you. We're going to keep going. And he was so incredibly strong that every submission I put him in, he was able to get out of. There was one where I put him in a guillotine and I picked him up off his feet and I ran him into the wall, literally. Like, I'm going to, like, one way or another, like, this guy has got to go to sleep because he won't stop otherwise. And he went limp, and I let go of him and he slid down the wall. And then he power train doubled me all the way across the room and slammed me on my back. And we were right back at it. And it just, I thought, dear God. And at the end of the workout, I asked him, I said, what are you on? And he goes, what do you mean? What am I on? And I said, what kind of steroids are you on? And he goes, I'm not on anything. He goes, this is natural, bro. This is, because I'd never felt anything like that before in my life.
The definition of corn fed.
Yeah.
His earlobes just connected to his delts.
Yep.
No. And in those days I was strong,
Yeah, you're a big guy.
I mean, the most I benched at that time was about 365. I was a good athlete. When I was young, I could dunk a basketball at 5'10". I mean, that's like, people doubt that.
Well, you could see it just because of how big your hands are. Your tendons were built for something different. You could see it in just the size.
No, I can't. I had to do it two-handed. I can't palm a basketball.
No, I meant like the size of your hands. Like, you have fast twitch. Like, you have good tendons just in general. You could see it just by the way you're built. Just every time you pick your hand up.
Well, the thing is when I'd work out, I'd spent an entire summer working on dunking a basketball. That was my extra training for explosiveness. And so I got to where I could actually do that in college. But no, what I'm saying is that I was a good athlete. I was pretty strong. And Matt was so unbelievably strong that I'd never felt anything like it really in my life. So.
And that's just in general, I'm sure like having every athlete in there from different backgrounds kind of just like adds to the aura and the skills development of the gym.
Yeah, and everybody's a different style. It's like, if I'm a basketball coach, I'm going to teach everybody the fundamentals, at least the way that I understand them, right? And give everybody the building blocks of kind of how I want the game played. And then their personalities are going to take that and run. Like, if you're a Michael Jackson, you're going to be dunking from the free throw line and doing incredibly athletic things if you're capable. And then there's other guys like John Paxson who would shoot 3-pointers all day long, right? So it's their personalities and their style and their artistic vision of themselves have to then take over from the fundamentals and take that ball and run with it. You know what I mean? So.
Like having people like Matt and Tim and everybody in the gym, like as it evolved, what were some of the hardest rounds for you guys, would you say?
Oh man, all of them.
All of them.
That's what he's saying. Like everybody had their own strengths and everybody brought something different to the table. So, you know, like obviously Matt Hughes trying to move him at all was hard, but then trying to get inside the Tim's reach, and you know, and Nate was really good at you know, a certain thing, and then Joe Slick was another guy that had his specialty. So every round you had, you're fighting something different.
Mm-hmm.
Like here I got to be fast, here I got to be strong, here I got to be flexible, here I got to expect unexpected things. You just constantly getting new things thrown at you every round from a different partner that excelled at something different. So you just got so good at, you know, just, you know, falling into whatever flow needed to happen.
It was a never ending puzzle every round.
Exactly.
I love that. Did you have anything to add to that? Yeah.
It just improves your overall game, right? So everybody having their unique style and adapting to each other, and that constant metamorphosis of like I saw it as a wheel around a circle of a technique would be used, everyone would learn to defend it, then everyone would create new things and counters, and it's just a never-ending growing process of evolution. And then you could pull out 5 years down the road, you'd pull out a technique that used to be practiced 5 years ago, and nobody had seen it in so long that it would work again, right? So it's crazy stuff like that.
That was something I actually wanted to lean into and ask is like, do you see anything that's missing now today in the sport that's underutilized that you guys utilized back in the day?
Well, the problem I think is, or the situation, not really a problem, but the way the sport is angling, the rules of the sport are really starting to dictate what really excels. You know, the reason we see so many strikers now is because we have 5-minute rounds and a stand up every minute and a half.
Mm-hmm.
So a wrestler that's going to take somebody down and wear them out, that style just can't work anymore. So, you know, it doesn't matter if that's an effective way to fight. It's just not what the UFC is going to allow. And obviously all the other shows kind of follow suit with them. So, you know, I mean, if it's going to be a bigger and bigger separation, I think, between what is actually fighting and what is the sport of MMA that, you know, that people are trying to watch. So those are starting to be more and more two separate things we're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I think people are lacking the, at least they might not be lacking the versatility, but they might lack using the versatility of attacks to spread out the defense of their opponent, you know? So I don't see a lot of guys using their ability to take other people down just to put the fear of God potentially in their opponent, to be looking out for a takedown when actually they're going to strike. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's wild too, looking at people like Bo Nickel and people that don't even utilize their wrestling in MMA right now.
And I think the versatility, using your full toolbox is lacking. And then I think everybody training only in an MMA gym, like Jeremy was there for many, many years, and there were pro boxers coming in and amateur boxers coming in and sparring with us. And we would spar with them just in boxing for that purpose, right? To get the benefit of having those athletes there, where most MMA people are not going to a boxing gym. They're not going to a strictly jiu-jitsu gym. They're not going strictly to a Sambo world-class guy, or, you know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
To really, because the goal was back then, I want to be able to hang for an hour with the best, you know, Brazilian jiu-jitsu black belts in the world, and, you know, kind of be at a stalemate type situation, to be able to hang with them, or to spar with, you know, one of the world's best boxers for 10 rounds and actually hang and actually hit them, you know, those sorts of things, so that when you got into the cage, you knew your each individual skill set and category was above that of your opponent. You know what I mean? So that's, I guess, in my perspective, that's kind of what's missing to a certain extent.
They're lacking kind of like the fundamentals and the foundations of each individual, as because I mean, I guess at elite, you still have, you know, just strikers on one side. So Jeremy still has a part of that in his gym, because
we still do it that way. I know there's a lot of gyms that they have like MMA classes where all they do is everybody puts on gloves. And I mean, I don't know. I never really understood it that way. Like, I don't know what an MMA technique is. Like, if you're going to say, okay, we're going to drill setting up a takedown with a couple of punches. Well, go train your boxing and build those punches. Go train your wrestling and build that takedown. Now you can do them together. Like,
right.
you know, if you want to try to focus on, you know, I'm going to throw 2 punches and then shoot a takedown. Well, I don't have to respect those punches because you're not wearing gloves. I know you're not going to hit me. So, you know, you lose the effectiveness. I have always felt like we train them separately with the intent to win in that discipline. And then when we put them together, everything just will morph together as it should. I mean, then we can put a little bit of time together, kind of training them all together. But yeah, that's kind of what Pat was saying, is everybody's kind of mushing everything together. And what that ends up being is one style of striking that's, you know, conducive to the UFC.
I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, Jeremy, because when we sparred, I mean, there were times where we would do technique, of course, but when we sparred, we did it with 16-ounce gloves, headgear, shin pads, and we sparred hard. And that was, you know, getting in a race car and driving in an actual time trial or a race, to be ready for the actual fight speed and not get people hurt. So I see a lot of people now training MMA with just MMA gloves and shin pads and things like that. But what would have happened to us, Jeremy, if we would have done the intensity of sparring we did with MMA gloves on? I don't think many of us would have ever made it to the fight.
There would have been a lot of injuries, a lot of people getting hurt. Yeah.
Yeah, there's I'm looking, like you said, looking at it as a whole. You break it down into sections, and then maybe at the end of the week or whatever it is, you'll have your MMA rounds. And then I feel like you see a lot of repetitive things nowadays too, like the lower leg kicks, or like soon as they see something works, then everybody's doing it, and then they don't do X, Y, or Z. And then you have a lot of people that have these skill sets and they don't utilize them anymore.
Yeah. And that's kind of what Pat was saying earlier about the way he looks at everything like a big wheel. But yeah, like right now that calf kick is really big. You know, I heard somebody saying the other day, they were down in Thailand, and they were saying down in Thailand, they don't really do that very often. They're used to the kicking the upper leg. So that calf kick is really bothering some of them. You wouldn't think that would happen in Thailand of all places, but I heard that it's kind of it's a new thing that they're not comfortable with. And so they're having to kind of adapt and learn and get conditioned to deal with that. But yeah, then sooner or later you go far enough down the line, and now suddenly, oh, look at this thing. I'm going to call this a straight right. I take my, you know, because nobody's doing it anymore. So now it's something new that everybody has to relearn.
Yeah, 100%. It's a why. It's just interesting to see somebody bring something new to the table, or something old that's been in circulation, like you guys were saying, and then it becomes a new fundamental thing or skill set to relearn.
I see that's kind of funny. I see that kind of thing all the time. The new guys coming up with their new videotape series about this new style of grappling, or this new leg attack, or this new guard. And I'm like, I was doing that 20 years ago. Like I just don't do it anymore because I just lost interest. Now I do some other stuff. And you know, yeah, it's funny to see people that like, it's a new technique that I've developed. I'm like, no, you didn't. I just didn't. I just didn't have a video camera 25 years ago when I was doing
like
it.
You're saying, it's like sambo leg attacks.
Yeah, exactly.
What are some of the maybe some of the new things that you do see, or new, if there are any new approaches or new methodologies that you guys find interesting in MMA nowadays compared to some of the early days of?
Well, that's the thing. I don't know that there is anything new until human beings grow an extra arm or an extra head or something. You got 2 arms, 2 legs, and a neck, and there's only so many ways to twist them and squeeze them. And there's only so many ways to strike. So
it's still a chessboard, right?
It is. Yeah. It's still, you know, you'll see, you know, different variations, but you know, I've always been of the mind that there's essentially 5 punches: jab, cross, hook, 2 uppercuts. You know, anything else is just a variation of that. So I think that's the same thing. Like, it's all just variations of techniques.
And like Jeremy, to add on to what Jeremy's saying about people, they'll even name a technique after themselves. And, you know, so nobody discovered it. It was, if anything, you know, rediscovered. We'll just say that. We'll give them credit for that. But more than anything, like Jeremy's saying, that pancreation was going on thousands of years ago. and the body hasn't changed, and they were doing everything like the old catch as catch can books that I have, Earl Lederman and Gotch and Burns and all those guys. Everything that's out there now, those guys were doing 100 years ago. So.
Mm-hmm. One of the biggest, the guys at the gym always give me a hard time. Pat, you'll get a kick out of this. So what is now commonly called the Von Flue choke. I refuse to call it that because we were doing that back in Iowa long before Jason Von Flue was a fighter. In fact, Pat Miletich did it to Chris Brennan in the UFC. That's how he finished a fight. It's just a matter of getting shoulder pressure into the neck at the right angle and driving into it. We used to do that all the time back in Iowa. Von Flue did it, when more people saw him, like, oh, we're going to name that choke after him. I'm like, no. I'm not going to call it that because we were doing that long before he was fighting.
Yeah. And and nothing against, Von Flue.
Of course. No, he did a great choke.
Mm-hmm. Because he finished a couple times across the board in pro MMA. That's where it was. That's revised.
Like, do you change the name of a triangle choke? Because I caught a lot of people in triangle chokes. Why don't you call that the Jeremy choke?
Yeah.
I did it a lot. No, because it was already established. It already has a name.
Yeah, the 3-horn right there.
Yeah. But yeah, so I mean, I like I said, I got nothing against Jason. He's a great guy and a great fighter. But I mean, I'm not going to call people. No, I'm not going to call techniques specific names because somebody tells me that I should.
Right.
I think I've told Jeremy this story when I was on Sonen's Chael Sonen's podcast many years ago, and he was arguing with me. Somehow we got into politics, and we were arguing about politics or something. And he kept arguing with me. And I go, listen, dude, if you keep this up, I'm going to call Jeremy Horn. Because Jeremy finished him with 2 triangles and one triangle armbar.
Yeah, I got let's see. In our first fight, I cut him. Our second fight was a guillotine, and then the third fight in the UFC was that weird arm lock.
Yeah, so the minute I said that, Chael was like, "All right, we're done with." Done.
His new kryptonite's that damn buggy choke.
Yeah.
Did you see that?
Yes.
With Craig Jones.
Yes.
Is that a newer? I didn't see the lineage of that.
Well, so yes and no. Again, I guess it depends on how far back you want to break things down. There's only so many ways to attack a body. Mm-hmm. So to me, what that essentially is a head and arm choke. Anytime you get my arm up against my head, you squeeze me here and here, you're cutting that off. Mm-hmm. I can do it with my legs and we call it a triangle choke. I do it with my arms. We call it an arm triangle or a figure 4 choke. We do it from this direction. We call it a darce. We do it from this direction. We call it an anaconda. Now we do it with my armpit and my leg and we call it a buggy choke. Mm-hmm. But it's still a head and arm squeeze. Mm-hmm. Is that different? You could say it's different. It's a new way of attacking it, but it's still a head and arm choke essentially.
Yeah, the application's a little different.
how it's kind of funny. It reminds me of a logical argument I heard a long time ago. Like, okay, so let's say you have a baby, a human baby. You would call that a baby. Well, if I turn its skin purple, is it still a baby? Yes, it's a human baby with purple skin. What if I give it a third eye? Now it's a human baby with purple skin and a third eye. How many changes do I have to add before you say that's no longer a human baby? That's something else. Or if I have a car, you have a car, and I take the bumper off and I put a new bumper on, and then I take a door off and put a new door on. How many parts do I have to change before that's no longer the same car? It's a new car.
Exactly.
How far do we have to go down this road to call it a new technique? I don't know.
Yeah, people are just trying to be original, right?
Yeah, and then like I said, sometimes it is the buggy choke. What they're calling is a definitely a unique way of attacking that head and arm pressure. Mm-hmm.
No, it's different because I was like, not too long ago, I was trying to look into the origins of that, and I was like, I don't know where that came from.
Yeah,
but like you said, do you have somebody that has a lot of eyes on them, and they can call whatever the hell they want to?
They start doing something with some success, and they gain some prominence.
Mm-hmm. So something that I found out that runs parallel for both of you guys, he was talking about it, was your guys' fear of heights.
I'm not so scared of heights as I am falling.
Yeah, no, that's what he was talking about the podcast on the way here. So it reminded me of when we went and did the VR thing.
Yes. Yes.
You ever done VR? Like the VR headsets?
Yeah, I've done a little bit of it, but yeah, no, the heights are, I know they stem from when I was a kid. I I don't know how many dreams of being able to fly, and then suddenly in the dream not being able to fly and falling to my death. And so I would wake up. I woke up screaming every time I'd hit the ground, right?
Oof.
And so you literally I did anyway, in the dream, felt the inertia of falling to my death. So if I'm on top of a tall building, for instance, and look, I can't get near the edge, all those types of things. But I've climbed mountains before.
Mhm.
If I can grab something, I'm not afraid when I'm inside of a plane,
Yep.
things like that. But
Same.
the to try and get over it, I um, rappelled off a 34-story building in downtown Des Moines. It didn't solve the problem. I was terrified the whole way down, but I did it. And then I jumped out of a plane with some Navy SEALs out in Virginia to try and get rid of it. But I'm still terrified of heights. Still.
This is the
Yeah.
longest cuss word you ever had.
Exactly.
I was gonna say too. For me, a long time. One of the ways I got over the fear is I used to help do tree trimming, and then they set me up a palm tree in the wind. So like it
those
rocks,
things
and they say
sway.
cut it on the rock. Like when it rocks, you got to cut one of the palms down. So like I have like spikes, a leather belt, and then I'm just going up it. And they did it on intentionally to have me do it in the wind, and that was my butt has never puckered so tight in my life.
I'll bet. Yeah, that'd be terrifying.
But
Yeah, a little bit.
yeah, but that's the thing too. Like we're talking about on our the podcast we had prior. It's like stepping into those things that you have fear. Because I don't know about for you, Pat, but like Jeremy was saying too, is like you have a fear before you go out and fight somebody, correct? Like there's the thousand, or for some people it could be different for Pat, but there you have there's the either not intimidating, but there's just like that that other person is training as well, and there's a puncher's chance always that you might not walk out the same with the victor.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. No, I was never afraid of getting hurt. I just didn't want to lose, because I did not like losing, of course. But and there were numerous fights where injuries were bad enough where that was certainly a concern, as far as being able to perform up to a level that you would expect of yourself. And so that was really the only time that I was truly nervous about fights, was when I had been injured and not able to train correctly for a fight.
Yeah.
And that's something I realized we glanced over. He was a UFC champion. That's definitely something we should talk about. When did you enter the UFC? And what was your? You could help me with this one specifically if you like. What was your path for the like to get the title? I forget. It was UFC. Was it 16 that or?
Yeah, no, and the weight division didn't exist at the time, and so I fought in a couple of Battle of the Masters in Chicago, which were no weight division, no time limit, no rules tournaments, and won those. And then fought in Hawaii, fought in some other stuff, Monty shows and stuff like that. And I think I was 21-1 when I went into the UFC, so I had gained a lot of experience. And that, I think, ultimately having that much experience before you go into a show like the UFC is important, because I do a podcast also, the MMA Mobsters podcast, with a gambling expert who's a UFC aficionado. He's very, very knowledgeable, Joshua Chauvin. And we break down fights, and he looks at it from a mathematical standpoint, and he knows the fighters very well. And then of course I look at it from a human aspect and all those different things. And the point I'm getting to is the number of fighters that are being brought into the UFC with like 5 fights is astronomical. Like they're taking over the industry at such a huge level, and tapping into these athletes at such an early stage in their career, that I give a kind of a warning to management and coaches that you got to quit putting these athletes into this level of show when they have so little experience, because they're getting chewed up and spit out by the meat grinder, at a pretty astronomical rate. And you don't want to do that, not only to an athlete, but a fellow human being who's going to get damaged severely by, getting getting,
You,
you know, ground up like they are. So
you have one of the, I wasn't sure if I was going to bring that up, but you have one of the most intense stories on that early on because you experienced what happens when somebody is not ready for the octagon or the cage. You were around for that situation to happen, correct? For the young man that ended up passing away.
yeah, that was when I had the UFC belt and was asked to be a guest at a kickboxing event. And one of the competitors was overweight. He was obviously very poorly trained, did not have good technique, and put in there. And yeah, he dropped after he got hit with a right hand. He went down, got back up. The referee, I saw the kid from across the ring because I was sitting ringside, and I said he's completely out of it. And the referee, you know, continued the action, and the kid collapsed. He didn't even get hit again. He collapsed, fell right in front of me, and I knew he was in trouble right away. You know, you've just seen enough injuries that you know. So I jumped in the ring, and the referee started after I said he stopped breathing because he stretched out and he stopped breathing. And then the referee started giving chest compressions, and I pushed the referee back and said, "Stop! I need to check for a pulse first," and started to check for a pulse. The referee jumped back in. I pushed him away again and said, "Stop it." And then some volunteer firemen jumped in with me, and we checked for a pulse. There was no pulse. Started CPR, and the kid turned blue in a matter of, I don't know, a couple minutes. And his pupils, I watched his pupils dilate and watched him die right in front of me.
Mm.
And so it was a very impactful moment for me. And so I was already training people at a pretty high level, you know, expectations. And when that kid died right there in front of me, it confirmed and concreted in my mind that I never wanted to be a coach who had to call somebody's, you know, mother or father or spouse or girlfriend and say, "Hey, so and so, you know, is in the hospital or didn't make it because I didn't properly train them." So I deliberately made it, not only because I expected to win, and the guys that were around us who survived everything were expected to win, and they had that same mentality, but also the people that didn't belong would leave long before they were ever going to get, you know, in a cage. So
So do you think, and I mean, I'm guessing this could be kind of a loaded question for an answer, but do you think there's, for amateur or for pro, do you think there's a Goldilocks zone for, maybe it depends on the individual or the athlete himself, but do you think there's a Goldilocks zone for amount of fights before they should go or before they should get in or go pro?
Yeah, I don't know if there's a specific zone that you could lump for everybody because I've seen so many different people with so many different demeanors and ability to maintain composure. I've seen guys that have 30 or 40 fights and they're fighting at a pretty high level and they are still a nervous wreck. They have no composure. They're just out of their mind and they fight on just pure instinct and adrenaline and it gets the job done.
Mm-hmm.
And then I've had guys like train with me for 6 months, take their first fight, and they are so calm and relaxed that during the fight, they're looking over and talking to me going, "Hey, what should I be doing? Okay, cool. I'll try this. Hey, that didn't work. What else can I like?" Just such a level of composure. I would never expect that from somebody with 6 months of training in a fight. So that's really what it boils down to, I think, is obviously a certain level of technique, but more than that, your level of composure and your ability to deal with stress and having shit thrown at you and being able to stay calm and deal with it. That's more important, I think.
Yep. And common sense from management standpoint and common sense from a coach's standpoint. One thing I've observed is just humans over the past 2 decades have kind of gradually lost the ability to think below the surface and with common sense. Almost, I hate to use this example, but you know, an agronomist at a university that's running a compost facility. And I know this example initially sounds crazy, but this is the lack of common sense that exists in the world today. And I said, "What are you using for inputs for your compost?" And he goes, "Well, we're using this lawn clippings and cow manure and things like that." And I go, "Well, and you're calling it organic. And he goes, well, yeah, it is organic. It comes from organic sources. I go, well, what chemicals were people putting on their lawns for, before they cut it and sent you the clippings? And what was the cow eating? Chemically grown grain, which ends up coming out of its ass as well. So no, you're just condensing chemicals with some organic matter and calling it organic. So that's the lack of common sense. And that guy's supposed to be an expert, right? So there's a lot of people out there that are throwing these athletes in before they're ready, and it shows. People are getting maimed and mangled because of it.
I've seen that a lot. The first gym I trained at in California, a lot of our guys were stepping stones for in California Fight Syndicate for some other guys.
Yeah.
Especially out here in Utah. Like I'm sure, I'm not sure how the MMA culture is out where you're at right now, but in Utah, like there's a lot of really, really good fighters here nowadays. So you'll see the difference between amateur to pro.
Yeah, and it used to be much, much worse where you could get a license with no training. Promoters would really take advantage of that. They, before there was any amateur or pro distinction, it was, here, I'll pay you $50 if you want to come fight. Guys that had no idea what they're doing. Yeah, it got pretty bad.
Is that you see that sometimes, like an old reminiscence of that, of like the street beefs and the rough and rowdy. I'm sure we all see those clips on social media.
Yeah, people that have no business fighting, that are in the ring fighting, gonna get hurt bad.
What do you guys think of this new RAF? Have you guys seen that?
I've not heard anything about it.
No, so it's basically like wrestling, but they you see RAF.
There was a local show that was RFA, I think, but yeah, that RAF, I don't know. Yeah, that's the one that Arman Saryukin and Polis. Yeah, I think that what I've seen so far, that looks entertaining. Yeah, and
they're getting paid some of them getting paid six figures.
I like wrestling. I like aggressive, competitive stuff like that. Yeah, it looks good so far. I haven't seen a ton of it, but what I've seen, I like.
Have you seen any of that, Pat? The RAF?
Yeah, I've watched some of it, and they've done that in the past, and it's struggled. They tried to get rid of wrestling out of the Olympics, right?
Wild.
So one of the original Olympic sports, of course. I think I'll give you an example. Golf is a really, really popular sport because anybody can golf, even shitty golfers can golf, right? And you can sell equipment and make a lot of money. And God knows the golf courses of America are filled with shitty golfers because I've seen them. I used to golf. Wrestling is a sport. Wrestling's a sport that while people can appreciate it, they don't understand it very well because of the complexities of the scoring and some of that stuff. So it's failed due to those things. So if you give people clear objectives, like, okay, there's submissions. Okay, that's the goal. An armbar, leg lock, choke, whatever. It actually improves its chances. In terms of adding like submissions and pins together, improves its chances. But the complexities of the scoring, the reversals, the this, the that, and a lot of people can't appreciate it. And when you get guys at that level, a lot of times it almost looks boring because they're so good, they negate each other's ability. So it's actually better to take a mediocre guy and throw him in with a really good guy and watch somebody get butchered to see the levels, I guess. I guess that's just my way of saying, I don't know what their chances are. I know they're papering a lot of the seats, the live auditorium stuff. So I'm not sure where they are financially. I'm glad the athletes are making some good money because they deserve to. I think it's just a matter of how it's structured, right?
I like that UFC is also letting it happen, you know, with the whole like that. Well, you guys understand how crazy of a monopoly that is. But I think it's cool that some people have these like ridiculously high hopes for certain UFC fighters, but then it's giving more eyes to some of the high level wrestlers as well. So it's hopefully going to put a little more steam in that engine to get people going. Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm hoping happens with it. Because nowadays, if anything has good marketing, it's going to look at slap fighting, with that kind of went over the hill.
Blows me away that anybody cares anything about that.
No.
Like that is 100% just CTE waiting to happen and they're all in. Like,
no thanks.
You let that happen, but you're going to tell me bare knuckle boxing is too bad or, it's just crazy. Just
BKFC's killing it too. They seem like they're doing really well. Yep. Hopefully that doesn't fizzle out at all. Getting back around to the Miletich days. What are some of your favorite stories of Jeremy?
You know,
I'm gonna have to step into
I
the
mean,
room.
Yeah.
well, just the story about the grill.
Yeah. I was gonna segue.
I don't need to tell it again, but more than anything, um, when we all used to go and fight in the Rings organization in Japan, they gave us these really expensive shin pads that were like $400 or $500 a pair.
That's
And there was a guy that was kind of an oddball that showed up at my gym, and I'm not going to throw him under the bus and say his name. It's not necessary, but um, so he showed up to practice with a pair of those shin pads on, and Jeremy's were missing, and there was no shin pads out there unless you had competed in Japan for the Rings organization. So it was easy for all of us to surmise and come to the conclusion that this kid had stolen Jeremy's shin pads. So we just set up the situation, and the guy was actually, I wouldn't say super tough, but he was tough enough to take a beating. He had been there for a while. And so we gave the green light to Jeremy to just, well, knock him out, I guess is basically how that went. And so when Jeremy head kicked him and knocked him out when they were sparring, and it was on the up and up. They were sparring. Jeremy head kicked him and knocked him out. And while he was unconscious, Jeremy grabbed his shin pads and snatched them off of his body, like pulling the cowboy boots off a dead cowboy. that was that's just one of the many stories, but
I'm sure he wanted those shin pads on you for that head kick because
exactly.
you got the old beat up ones.
Yep.
Yeah. So
what? Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
well, Jeremy was there for when the 6 gangbangers showed up to spar with us.
I don't know if I remember this one.
What?
I don't know if I remember this.
Yeah, you were there. Yeah, you beat up a couple of them. So these guys showed up earlier in the day before the fighters got there, and they said, we want to train here. And I said, okay. And I gave them a schedule. I said, any of you guys ever box, wrestle, any of that stuff? And I was like, yeah, we box, we box a little bit at the Davenport Boxing Club, stuff like that. And I go, well, you'd probably be best served coming to the beginner intermediate classes. Here's when the pad classes are, beginner grappling and all that stuff. And they're like, no, we want to train with your fighters. And that's when, remember Angelo?
Oh yeah.
Remember Angelo that became part of our team? Well, that comes from this event, we'll say. So I said, no, I don't think you really want to train with my fighters right out of the gate. And they said, yeah, we do. Like, they were fully confident they were going to beat up all the fighters. So anyway, they came back and I had them sign waivers. And then I said to all the guys, these guys want to spar with you. Does anybody have any extra gloves or shin pads? And literally gloves and shin pads came flying through the air. Like, yes, here, give them these. And so anyway, I matched all these guys up with Matt Hughes and Jeremy and Jens Pulver and Jeremy and some of the other hammers in the room, and just completely annihilated these poor bastards. I mean, it was ugly. And I think they all got knocked out, from my memory anyway. But Angelo came back the next day, and Angelo said he came back and kept coming back for like 2 months. And then finally walked up to me after being at practice for 2 months straight. And he said to me, he goes, how can I become part of this team? And I go, well, Angelo, there's kind of a process that you have to go through to become part of the team. And Angelo looks at me and he goes, you mean getting my ass beat for 2 months straight isn't good enough for you to be part of this team? And I said, okay, I get what you're saying. So Angelo actually fought, actually did pretty well, left the gang life, had a family, was a good family man and a father and all of that. So yeah, but great story.
No, that's great. You whooped the gang life right out of him.
Yeah.
Literally.
Surprising what a little bit of physical abuse can do for people.
2 months of beating him out of the gang.
And that's
Yeah.
what I try to explain to people, like do some sort of MMA, even I guess the karate could be a thing, but like you understand where the pecking order really is and
Yep.
it's never the direction you think.
Yeah.
What's one of your favorite stories about Pat here?
Oh, I mean, there's so many like that. So I remember one in particular. I can't remember who you were sparring with, but this made me laugh to this day. They were Pat and this other guy were sparring, and I don't remember if maybe tempers got a little flared or Pat was just having fun. But at one point, he just whips his gloves off and shoots a double leg on this guy right in the middle of sparring practice because he's like, you know what, I've had enough of this. I'm going to take you down now. But things like that were pretty commonplace. Just everybody always having a good time, like training hard, but keeping a light spirit about it. And just, like there's nothing better than like beating the hell out of your friends and then everybody sit around afterwards laughing and having a good time.
Yeah, embracing the suck together.
Exactly,
That's a real community.
Yeah.
So like in getting back on that, like the whole like creating that gym and the philosophy behind it, like how it sounds like it was fun, but how powerful and fun was it to be part of like one of the beginning stages of like that gym in general?
Well, looking back is different than being in it. I think when we were in it, at least for me, I never really saw it for what it was. When I moved to Iowa, the sport was still just growing, just barely getting started. I had no idea that I was going to become a fighter. Like I was working a job in Omaha and I moved to Iowa and I figured I would continue working a job. I wanted to be a part of this thing that was cool. It was fun. I was a martial artist. I love training. I love fighting. So I'm going to go get a job and I'm going to keep fighting on the weekends. And this will just be the hobby that I love. And then it just turned out that I was fighting so often, I didn't need to get a job. Fighting every weekend, making $500, like cool, my rent's paid. I guess I don't have to get a job. So I just trained all the time and then fought all the time. And just going to the gym every day, seeing all the guys, it's one of those things. I can't remember what movie it's from, but the guy said something like, when you're in the good old days, I wish you knew they were the good old days. Like, I wish you knew then, I look back and think, man, we had so much fun. And like, those were the glory days. But when I was in them, I was just a kid waking up and going to the gym, drink a protein shake, go train with the guys, come back, take a nap, go back, train again. That's just all it was.
Pun intended, glory days, right?
Yeah. I didn't realize I didn't realize what we had there. I was just a kid that was training and having fun, doing what I love. It never occurred to me that I'm a professional fighter. I remember Monty called me one time. I was out riding my bike and he called me. And he starts asking me questions and he's like, hey, there was a magazine called Full Contact Fighter back before the internet. We actually had these things where people would actually print words on paper and then mail them out to people. And that's how information got around. And so Full Contact Fighter was a magazine that was one of the more prominent ones. And he goes, yeah, they're doing an article on you in Full Contact Fighter. Like you're up for Fighter of the Year. And I'm like, why? Why are they doing that? He goes, well, how many fights have you had? I'm like, I don't know. I've had like 35 fights this year. He goes, well, how many have you lost? I'm like, none. I've had 35 fights this year and I've not lost once. And he's like, yeah, you're in the running for Fighter of the Year. And I was like, holy shit. It never occurred to me, man. I wake up, I go to the gym, I do what I love. I train with my friends. On the weekend, I go fight. I do what I love. I come back. It never occurred to me that I'm now a professional fighter and I'm a pretty good one. I was just having fun training with my buddies.
Like Jeremy's level was so high. Think about this. Like when he fought Anderson Silva back in the day, Jeremy had an injury where he was crippled. He literally couldn't move. And Anderson Silva couldn't do shit with him. Like couldn't hurt him, couldn't do anything to him. I mean, a healthy Jeremy would have absolutely beat Anderson Silva. That's the thing that people don't realize. We were fighting injured where a lot of guys are going to pull out of these fights these days, 100%, where we're fighting because we had to pay our rent. That was a paycheck that if it didn't happen, we were going to end up homeless. So Jeremy fighting Anderson Silva, completely and utterly crippled and not able to hardly move, and Anderson not being able to do shit with him in that fight, that tells you what level Jeremy was at. You know what I mean?
No, 100%. And it was so funny that you bring up that one specifically, because when I was training, one of the first gyms I trained at when I was in Utah was Jeremy's gym, and I was like, "Can you imagine fighting Anderson Silva?" He was like, "Yeah, I can. I did." And then he tells me, I find the video and I watch it, and I was like, "You won that damn fight!" Like, what is he talking about? Undefeated fighter. I watched it 3 times. Like, he definitely, that was
I don't remember the name. I think it was Gladiators. But it was a show in Korea.
Because I remember it's like orange ropes or something in the ring.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's the thing is, no, Jeremy was the UFC. He was the UFC champ. He was, and this is, Jeremy might not want me to share this, but Jeremy was going to be the UFC champ. And we have things that happen in life that derail us or throw us off. And I can tell you that what happened to Jeremy before, and I won't go into details, but what happened to Jeremy before the Elvis Sinisek fight that would have put him into position to win the title, definitely was something that, a very unique situation, totally out of his control, that screwed things up. He absolutely would have been the UFC champ. So, and Jeremy obviously remembers those days well, and when all that stuff happened, and it was very unfortunate for him. And he's the best fighter out there that didn't have a UFC belt around his waist.
That's what I'm saying. He's a champ in all our eyes for sure. As you can tell.
I'm lucky to be part of the sport, man. Like I said, like the sport has given me the life that I've lived and allowed me to travel the world and meet cool people and punch them in the face. And, I'm thankful for the life I've lived.
What's wild too is you could take like most top 5 fighters and you've had as many fights as all of them together.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess there's like Muay Thai fighters and stuff like that that are up there. But yeah, dude, and same with you. You guys are both such pioneers and legends of the sport. Like, I can't think of, like, when I had the ability to be able to put you guys both on one podcast, I'm like, yes, yes, I love this. And then to hear the fun stories, like finding out that his biggest rival ever was a barbecue grill.
I'm still 0-1.
Yeah, he was 35-1.
Yes. The grill got me.
Yeah. There was more charcoal than blood.
Yeah, Jeremy knows how to charcoal grill now.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I throw it down on the grill now. It's the one skill the big skill he developed through the Miletich system.
Yes. So Jeremy, do you still do seminars for people like law enforcement and civilians and stuff like that?
I will here and there. I don't do a whole lot of seminars anymore just because I'm kind of lazy and kind of a hermit, but I spend a lot of time here locally training with a lot of the law enforcement, the Sandy PD guys and a lot of the other city law enforcement come in and train with me. But I also work with Post, which is like the state level agency, I guess you'd call it, that trains all the law enforcement. So yeah, I'm pretty involved with local law enforcement, but I don't do a ton of like separate seminars.
Not yet. One of our friends and one of his students, David Allred, he's been pushing him to do more. Him and Kenny Florian just had one recently. It was really good.
Yeah, that was a good one.
That's awesome. Yeah, no, and I've got a lot of stuff. Jeremy, we'll have to circle back because I've got a lot of stuff as far as like the Mountain Readiness Expos that are going on. There's a huge one coming up in October of this year. And then there's another one in the summer in Montana that I'd love to have you at teaching.
Oh, nice. Yeah, I'd love to.
Outdoors.
All the experts in communications, firearms, tactics, night vision, you name it. A lot of the experts are there. So Jeremy would love to rub elbows and with those guys. And definitely I'd love to have him teach at something like that.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. I'd love to be a part of that.
Hell yeah. See, and this is why I'm happy I brought you all here. I wanted this. I was hoping for these kind of, I'm hoping he does more. Me and David are trying to get him out there. What are some of the other seminars and stuff that you have coming up, Pat?
I've got stuff going on. Like I said, in the beginning of May, there's a Mountain Readiness Expo during that time that I was going to be at. I can't be there, but it sounds like Spencer Fisher will be teaching at that one because that's over in North Carolina. So that'll be good for him to get a lot of exposure over there with those folks. But there's stuff coming up this summer. There'll be a lot of seminars. The one in Vegas coming up May 2nd or May 1st through the 3rd for the CatchCon. That would be awesome. Jeremy, if you want to come to that, I'd love to have you down there for that.
Yeah.
Totally up to you if you have time. But there's a lot of other stuff. And I do a lot of asymmetrical self-defense stuff now where, you know, like we talked about this statistically, the fear of being injured or killed these days is far outweighed by, you know, the chemical toxins in the environment, the number of heart attacks and cancers, and, you know, a lot of these kidney failure, respiratory, all kinds of different things that are taking people's lives to the tune of millions of people, and people not understanding that their environment is causing massive amounts of damage to them and their children. So for all those guys out there and all those women, those parents, and folks out there that want to learn self-defense, physical, kinetic, you know, self-defense, whether it's with hands, weapons, all those things, you know, understanding how to clean your body out of these synthetics and heavy metals, and how to renutrify yourself and basically bulletproof yourself to the environment is super, super important right now, because there's no reason to learn how to defend yourself or protect your own home when you're too sick to be able to do it, which is happening to a massive number of Americans right now. So
the cortisol and adrenaline fatigue or adrenal fatigue, all that stuff is just a byproduct of something way deeper.
Sure. Yeah. So it's understanding the hidden threats, you know, the silent weapons for quiet wars. People can look for that book and read about these things and understand. And that's where I realized, because of my illness as a child and finding solutions to it, which allowed me to do unique things as a fighter and a coach and other things, that there is no reason that other people should be getting ill and sick, because there are solutions. And you know that as an expert. So just helping people understand that the environment dictates genetic expression and immune function 100%. The food, the water, and the air, the soil, and, you know, other ways of these toxins finding their way into your body you're going to have issues unless you understand how to deal with it. So
100%. And people don't know what good feels like now. Like I'm sure you've been on both sides of that coin. We've been on both sides of that coin. You have in and outside of fight camp. You have, and all three of us here have played our role in alcohol consumption. All four of us, including Travis. So yeah, they're like, it's so hard in this day and age that people don't understand how good you can actually feel until you experience it.
Sure. Yeah. No, and there's been a lot of people, you know, I don't recognize disease, period. It does not exist. It is merely how your genetics will manifest the toxins that your body is taking in, right? Where that will manifest, whether it's respiratory, digestive, joints, brain issues, hormonal, you know, all these different things. So I just don't accept any of the explanations that they try to blame our genetics for our problems. Does heart disease run in your family? That's all basically your genetics manifesting the toxins that have harmed you. So ultimately, it's super important for people to understand that germ theory and terrain theory, when we explain it in detail to people, they see it very clearly, what the real problem is. And without that education and without that understanding, it's very difficult to combat what we're dealing with in today's, you know, world, right? So, you know, when you can financially incentivize the toxifying of the entire nation and through agriculture, chemicals, and things like that, you know, people have to pay their bills. What are they going to do to pay their bills? Well, coming from a guy that climbed in a cage to fight other human beings, people will do stupid shit for money, right? Even toxifying the environment and denaturing it. So we have to be very aware of those problems, those threats that we face, and solve them ourselves.
100%. I couldn't have said it better. I couldn't physically say it better myself because I'm not as big of a professional on that side of things as you are. I'd love to have you on specifically just to talk about that. I'll bring on probably another one of my friends. I'd consider him a professional in this field, so we could have a deep conversation about this as well. Where can they find you, Pat? Social media, wherever you want, websites?
People can find me on Instagram at Patrick Miletich and Facebook at PJ or Patrick Miletich. They can find our soil solutions for contaminants, and anybody out there that wants to grow a Jurassic garden or an orchard or just decontaminate their soil, they can go to soilsaviors.org and listen to our educational videos and learn a little bit more about how nature has always provided the solutions through microorganisms, biology, nutrients, and how to heal the planet, literally.
That's amazing. Yeah, so we'll talk off camera too. I'd like to get a couple of these, a couple of your companies that you work with or you own on some of the ads too, so we can get it out there to more people. I think you're leading by example, and you're a pioneer in many ways. And for you to go and dig deeper and deeper into these realms, it's a much needed conversation that unfortunately gets contained by algorithms and social media and random nonsense by these elites.
Yeah, and that's the thing that I recognized as well is we are not companies. We are ecclesiastical self-supporting ministries. Everything we do is with what's been provided by nature, by creation, and so therefore proving that creation and nature has more power than any man-made monstrosity because we have the data. That's really what this is all about.
100%. My apologies for lack of a better term, but yeah, I fully support. I think more of us need to create rather than constantly consume. So I think that's amazing. Thank you so much too for being on today. It's been great. I feel like the 10-year-old that started watching UFC from walking down the store 9 or whatever I was I probably started watching UFC and MMA in probably like 1998. I was like 8 years old when going and getting the recycled VHS tapes from the rental stores, you know, and then bringing them home. So yeah, I remember. Yeah. No, but it wasn't even, it was the runoffs, like the secondhand videos. That was like the balling on the budget. My parents were like, we're going to go to Blockbuster once a month on Fridays. You know, we ain't spending $15 on you kids. Yeah. But yeah, thank you so much for being on. And Jeremy, where can they find you as well?
I'm on social media a little bit. I don't do much of it, but Jeremy Horn MMA, I think, is on Instagram and Facebook. And I think the gym is Elite Performance MMA.
It is. We'll link it in the show notes too.
Cool.
And I'm proud of you, man. You're Elite Performance, whoever you have running it. You have some funny reels.
I hired a company to do it, and one of my buddies, Brandon, from the gym, has been helping out. He volunteered to help me because he just likes doing that stuff. It's fun for him.
Dude, it's funny. They're really good.
He's been knocking it out of the park.
And then it's just not in your bandwidth. It gets done.
Yep.
And you get to laugh at whatever he creates because all the coaching ones are hilarious.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. He does a great job.
So thank you guys for coming on, and anybody that doesn't know either one of you, you gotta get educated on the pioneers for UFC and MMA. These two guys here are legends. We have a UFC and MMA royalty in front of us. So thank you guys so much for being on. And remember, get out of your minds, get into your hearts, and get onto the mats and train, because we don't have to be these weak physically and weak-minded individuals. It's your choice to get stronger. Life doesn't get easier. You just get stronger and capable. Have a great day, everybody.